We are back for hour number 2. I'm Jeff Rense, the program The End of the Line. My guest tonight, Stephen Jacobson. Hour number 1 was spent talking about mind control in America, which is the name of Mr. Jacobson's audio cassette presentation on that subject. Again, that's $11.95 for that one. Well worth it. That's postpaid in P.O. Box 15734, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Zip code is 27113, and that's to MCIA Media for Mind Control in America. Hour number 2, we're going to talk about his other tape called Wake Up America, which talks about money and the financial morass this country finds itself in. Stephen, what is the actual purpose of money?
Well, the purpose of money, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not to make money. The true purpose of money, it's a transportation system to facilitate moving goods and providing services. That's all. It's a transportation system.
Okay.
To facilitate the operation of society, the peaceful, healthy administration of society. That's its purpose. Now, the effects, when you have an honest money system, then everything is in balance. When you have a dishonest money system, as we have today in this nation, as other nations have, then you have the situation that we witness today. All of America's social and economic problems, the core of the problem is a dishonest money system. If the money is bad, then everything else in society is going to be contaminated, corrupted, to the extent that the money system is no good.
Does this go all the way back to the Rothschild dictum, which was, I guess, over 200 years ago now, when one of the original Rothschilds said, "Permit me to issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws"?
Yes, it goes back, however, even further than that. Our core economic problem, and let me preface before I get into defining what I believe the problem is and what the solution is that I'm not an economist. I'm a researcher. I write. My background is in communications. I investigate things because I want to understand, and I go through a lot of material, summarized material, in the hopes that put it together in a form so that other people have access to it. I know that many people don't have the time to read and investigate things on their own, and then there are those who simply don't care. But the Mind Control in America tape and this tape on money, Wake Up America, are simply meant as tools to aid in presenting information with that is not available from established media sources, so that people have access to information to understand a little more clearly what is going on here. Now, I go through a lot of information. I see the issue of mind control. All other issues come under it. It's an umbrella issue. The issue of money I investigated from the standpoint of the mind control issue, and that is that we don't understand the money system. If Americans understood how the money system operated, they'd be astounded at what is going on, if they understood. And I came to my understanding by simply having access to information and study and research to see what was happening, gathering material from people who have spent many years investigating the matter, from materials that unfortunately I could not find in the local public library or even local college and university libraries.
There is a quote here, Stephen, I'm sure you're familiar with, and it goes like this: "There is not one man within the sound of my voice who does not know that the Federal Reserve Bank system is the greatest ripoff ever known to man." That was the statement of the American patriot, the late Congressman Louis T. McFadden, who was chairman of the House Banking Committee up to the time he was murdered.
And he fought valiantly to inform people of what was happening, and yet even from his position, he was silenced, and the information was kept from larger and larger numbers of people. It is a numbers game in part, in that there are very few people who are the ones who are pulling the strings, or who are the real leaders, of many of whom we probably wouldn't recognize their names. Others, their names are already familiar to us. When more and more people understand, when enough people understand how they are controlled, then that control will end. When people understand the techniques being used through media, and then how the money system actually operates, identifying that it is dishonest, that's the problem. It's not honest. Now, to get into what the problem is. Part of the essence of psychological warfare is to confuse the meaning of words and infiltrate the mind with the conflicting concepts. When you mention the word or the title, the name Federal Reserve, the word federal in the name Federal Reserve leads the public to believe that the Federal Reserve is a government institution.
Indeed it does.
And that is not by accident. It is misleading. It is a misleading use of language. The Fed, as it's commonly called, is a private corporation. It is owned by foreign and domestic banks and operated for profit. Now, the Fed is based on the same principles. Its origin is similar to that of the Bank of England, the Bank of France, the Reichsbank of Germany, the Bank of Italy. All these banks were founded as privately owned banks and not as government institutions as their names imply. And so here's an example of using language to deceive. It's not a problem that is particular just to this country. All the world suffers from deceit and deception and having been placed in illusion where they don't know what is going on. Mm-hmm. But the Fed is a private corporation.
When was it formed?
1913 was when the Federal Reserve Act was passed. In fact, it was on December 23rd. Congressmen were anxious to go home for the Christmas holiday, those who were still there, and it was passed with many people, many congressmen not even reading its contents. But by passage of that piece of legislation and the signing of it into law by President Woodrow Wilson, it turned over the money system of this nation to a group of private bankers and allowed them to create money simply by making bookkeeping entries, loan it at interest, and take title to real property as collateral. A real confidence game. It goes back to something that began several hundred years ago, and I think we need to go back to the origin of the problem, where it began, and then come back to present day, what's going on now, to understand the nature of the problem.
Okay, let's do that.
Centuries ago, it became common practice for people to store their gold in the vault of the local goldsmith for a fee. The goldsmith would give the depositor a receipt for the amount of gold stored for safekeeping. The receipt was not money, but a money substitute. It also became common practice for people to exchange these warehouse receipts with one another for goods and services as if they were money, since the receipts could be redeemed for the gold held in storage. Mm-hmm. Now, a thing happened here. The goldsmith discovered that only a small percentage of the gold stored in his vault was ever reclaimed. People were using the receipts, the money substitute, as if it were the real money, the real thing, because they had confidence that they could take that receipt to the goldsmith and get the real gold. Now, when people were not reclaiming the real money, the real thing, the goldsmith began issuing receipts for more gold than he had. He began to use some of them himself to buy things, and then he loaned the rest at interest while taking title to real property as collateral.
Uh-huh.
In either case, there was no gold in the vault for these extra receipts, and that's the point. That's the problem. By increasing the money, the quantity of the money substitute, the receipts,
yes,
the goldsmith stole from everyone who had put real money in his vault and to whom he issued receipts. The point being that paper currency, a money substitute, is honest only when the real money for which it is a substitute equals the number of receipts in circulation.
Right.
In other words, there has to be a one-to-one relationship between what's held in the vault and the banknote, which is not the money, but it is a receipt for the real thing.
Yes.
Now, the problem is by manipulating the quantity of the paper currency, the goldsmith, and in later years he formed alliances with others who knew the arcane secrets of banking. The whole principles behind fractional reserve banking go right back to what the goldsmith was doing. Modern day banking practices originate with what the goldsmith was doing. He was issuing more receipts than he had gold.
Okay, time for our first break, Stephen, and that word you just used, fractional reserve banking, we want to talk about that and define it very clearly as we continue here after this break at the end of the line. News Talk 1250 KTMS. All right, we are back with Stephen Jacobson talking about the Federal Reserve and America's monetary policies here. Stephen, let's define fractional banking. We'll open the phone lines up and see if we've got some callers out there. We have one already. The number here, by the way, is 805-962-8731 or star 1250 on the GTE mobile net. That's 962-8731 for calls for Stephen Jacobson talking about economy of this country and mind control. All right, Stephen, fractional banking, what is it?
Well, going back to what the goldsmith was doing, he created fractional reserve banking. He was keeping a fraction of the total amount of gold that he was supposed to have. He only had a fraction of it. Mm-hmm. Because he was issuing more receipts than gold he held on deposit. So that's where fractional reserve banking comes from. The goldsmith only had a fraction of what he was actually supposed to have.
Uh-huh.
And that's the origin of the problem. Paper money can be honest only when there's that one-to-one relationship. Now, part of the problem, aside from this is a major problem here, that we're supposed to have a one-to-one relationship with real money, and people, unfortunately, think that those things that they carry in the billfold, those pieces of paper with numbers on them, they think that that is money, and they think it erroneously and understandably because we were not taught any different. We certainly don't get an education in a public school system or even higher education to what the true nature of the problem is. The economic science has been so corrupted to make people feel that they don't have the capacity to understand what's going on, financially, and it best to be left to those who have the training and initiation into that arcane science, and so everyone throws their hands up and leaves it to somebody else.
Yes.
But it can be understood by the man in the street.
No.
The man in the street can understand dishonesty, and the whole thing is based on dishonesty. When you go to a goldsmith and give him your gold and get a receipt and then use these receipts as your medium of exchange, and then the goldsmith, the forerunner of our modern-day banker, goes and issues more receipts and does with them as he pleases to acquire wealth and impoverish others.
Yes.
Part of this, part of the problem is that we don't understand. We don't understand what money is. We don't understand what a dollar is. Goes back to the manipulation of language. Part and parcel of controlling what people think is to manipulate words and their meaning. George Orwell talked about this in 1984. He called the redefining of words newspeak, where traditional definitions are eliminated while new meanings are repeated over and over again until accepted. The definition of the word dollar has undergone a transformation to hide the fact that it is not money, but in reality a unit of measurement for gold and silver coin. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Code, United States Code, federal law, says that the terms lawful money or lawful money of the United States shall be construed to mean gold or silver coin of the United States. Again, from the code, the money of account of the United States shall be expressed in dollars. What this means is a dollar is not money. It is the expression of money. It is simply a unit of measurement. It's like an inch or a quart or a mile. Congress, in the Coinage Act of 1792, fixed the dollar as a specific weight of silver in the form of a coin, and fixed the value of gold coin in relation to the dollar unit of silver. If there are no gold and silver coins, there are no dollars of anything. A unit of measurement cannot replace or become the thing for which it is the measure. But in the mind of the public, this is exactly what has happened. People have been led to believe that a dollar is both money and a measure of it.
Can't be
Again,
both.
George Orwell called this doublethink, where the mind is infiltrated with conflicting concepts unawares.
Your example on your audio cassette, Wake Up America, dollars cannot be money any more than quartz can be milk, is very, very good and says it all. Let's take a call, Stephen, from Craig here in Santa Barbara. Craig, are you there? Is Craig still holding?
Hello?
Yes, Craig?
Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Hi, I agree with Mr. Jacobs about the need for more education with regards to economics and political issues. However, I disagree with him on 2 points. One is that I believe the Federal Reserve was developed as an autonomous body to keep the economics from being politicized. I believe the chairman is given a 12-year term to have autonomy so that there's some stability in the economic system, and that's all. And that's why even presidents try to cajole and affect, or Congress people try to cajole and affect the Fed into doing this or that. But the Fed is looking for specific goals in making sure the economy is solid. And that's why it needs that autonomy, similar to what Supreme Court justices are given with life terms. Secondly,
well, let's stop right there and let him respond to that first one. Steve.
Well, the gentleman has given the party line in that this is what is usually taught. And this was what was sold to the American people at the time prior to its passage. Going back to when when these events came about, when the Federal Reserve came about, the public was told that, just what the gentleman said later on, but it was told that the purpose was to prevent the financial, economic dislocations that had occurred previously, to prevent panics and crashes and depressions. Problem here, and the problem is this, that they were using, again, Hegelian dialectics, which is mentioned earlier with relation to crime and violence and the passage of legislation to restrict freedoms. A situation was created where a problem was created. What caused the panics, the crashes, the depressions that led to the Federal Reserve Act was the same thing that later caused the crash of 1929 and the Great Depression, and that is manipulating the amount of credit in paper money, just like the goldsmith had done. And by creating that problem, they created a crisis situation where people demanded that something be done. Anxiety was created again. Anxiety and stress, fear, as a strategy to cause action in a direction of a predetermined goal. And the goal was to bring about the creation of the Federal Reserve. It has done the exact opposite of its supposed mission. It completely eliminates, completely manipulates all economic life in this country. And the problem goes back to what the goldsmith was doing. That when the goldsmith issued his first receipt for paper money that didn't exist, okay, the paper money was a receipt for gold that didn't exist, rather. When he did that, he did two things. He created inflation, and he created credit. There are only two economic systems. You're either going to use what we use now, credit, which is in reality a slave system, or you use real money, an honest money system where you have honest weights and measures, where you're using what is mandated by our Constitution. Our Constitution mandates a monetary system of gold and silver coin. It doesn't say anything about printing paper money, and it certainly doesn't authorize Congress to give that right to a private corporation to go print paper money. Well, paper money is dishonest when there is not that one-to-one relationship between the real money.
Well,
okay, Craig, go ahead, Craig.
Thank you. Well, I still disagree with you on the primary point, but I think the second point addresses what you're on now, which is that you're implying that since you keep on pointing back to a gold standard, that gold itself has an intrinsic value, and in fact, gold has value because we give it that value. God didn't say gold is worth X amount of dollars. People decided that this is the medium with which we would make exchanges.
Well, that's right.
Handing cattle or yards of material back and forth in a barter type system, we used gold. And similarly, paper it has taken that place. Now you have I think some fairly legitimate points with regards to the overextension of credit and so forth, but I think your previous points are stretching it theoretically, and that's where I disagree. That there is no intrinsic value
to make it clearer, because you've hit on an important point that is at the heart of our problem. There are only two economic systems. One is barter, the other is credit. Barter is simply the exchange of one thing of value for something else of value. A monetary system using gold and silver coin is a barter system. Throughout history, many different things have served as a medium of exchange because, as you have pointed out, money in and of itself doesn't exist. Something has to be used as money. People have traded for goods and services using different things: cows, salt, tea, opium, tobacco. But gold and silver have been accepted as money worldwide throughout history. all things used as money have had a common characteristic. They were all tangible wealth. They were all things you could touch. They were all things you could weigh and measure. Credit, on the other hand, is intangible. You cannot touch it. You cannot weigh and measure it because there is no substance to weigh and measure. It is all imagination. Modern banking is based on magic. These are literally magicians. They have a magic show going on that we cannot see through the illusion because we're distracted. Credit is nothing. It's nothing. There's nothing there.
Well,
there's no substance. What does the number on a Federal Reserve note? You get pull on a $5 bill. It says $5 on it.
Right.
What is it $5 of? The problem is, it's $5 of nothing.
Right.
That's the problem. It's not honest.
Let's let Craig respond. Go ahead, Craig.
Well, that's first of all the magic side of it. I think that with any man-made system you can interpret things that way, but the reality is that what credit is confidence. It's faith in the system. It's faith that your pile of cash is worth this car.
It's a function of psychology.
Right, and that's the problem. Real money is real wealth. Real money is substance. Money is not psychological.
But that's when. But then you fall back on your thing about real money being gold, which my point earlier is that it really does not have any, in and of itself, it does not have a value. For instance, if all of a sudden they found that on the moon, they found that there's these huge gold mines, all of a sudden the value of gold would change dramatically. It could be worth water. It could be worth air. Because all of a sudden we have so much more. So it's more of an assigned value from which we can all agree on.
And it has worked for thousands of years, and throughout the thousands of years of history, economic history, no one has ever said that gold isn't worth the paper it's printed on. And it doesn't matter if you're going to use gold, if you're going to use silver, you've got to use something that's real, something that can be measured, where you can have a standard of value, where every dollar is going to have the same purchasing power at all times, which is why when the Constitution was framed, that it was mandated, we have a monetary system of gold and silver coin. Credit is a system by which this nation and all of its citizens are being raped by the banking system.
All right, on that, we've got to take our break. Thank you.
May I just say one last thing?
Very quickly, Craig, yes.
The Constitution, too, was printed on paper by men. Thanks for letting me make those points.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling. Thanks for listening.
Yes, it printed on paper, but men shed their blood to make sure that at least we have some basis for honesty in administering society.
Very intense subject, this economic business of ours. We'll continue here at the end of the line after this short break, 1250 KTMS. We are back at the end of the line here. Our guest, Stephen Jacobson, on the phone live from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We've got calls holding. Stephen, there's a classic routine in an Abbott and Costello movie, which is featured in your tape, Wake Up America, also available by writing to MCIA Media, P.O. Box 15734, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27113. You want to set this little bit up for me, then we'll take our next call.
Okay, yes. Let me preface it with a couple of points before I set it up, because I want to make sure that there are a couple of points that are clear, which lead into that section on Abbott and Costello and how the Federal Reserve actually works. Just to rephrase a couple of important points here, and that is honest money. An honest money system uses wealth as a medium of exchange. Wealth is physical and not psychological. Credit is not wealth. No labor is expended in the creation of credit other than a magician's sleight of hand. Again, the goldsmith, when he issued his first receipt for gold that didn't exist, he created both credit and inflation. Let me go back to this important point. Paper money is a money substitute. And it's honest only when the real money for which it is a substitute equals the number of receipts in circulation. When half of the receipts were circulating as a money substitute are redeemable in gold, the other half is both credit and inflation. When none of the receipts are redeemable, all of it is credit and inflation, because bank credit is inflation. And the only cure for inflation is honest money. By manipulating the amount of paper money in circulation, by manipulating the quantity of credit that is available, the banking system determines everything that's happening in this country, what happens in our individual lives. We've got to think this thing out clearly, historically, what money is, what it's supposed to be.
Okay. All right, let's do this little thing. We've got 3 callers holding, Stephen.
Okay.
Set us up with Abbott and Costello here.
Well, again, it's a manipulation of, it's a classic example of manipulating words and numbers. Bud Abbott wants to borrow $50 from Lou Costello, and Lou doesn't have $50, right, but he has $40.
Let's hear it.
And we go into the routine, and the way they work it is very similar to how the U.S. government borrows money from the Federal Reserve. It's the same kind of logic.
How the U.S. government borrows money from the Federal Reserve is not much different from the Abbott and Costello comedy sketch in their movie Buck Privates, where Bud Abbott wants to borrow $50 from Lou Costello. Listen to their routine and compare it with the explanation of how the Federal Reserve works its magic that follows.
Do me a favor, loan me $50. Schmitty, I can't lend you $50. Oh, yes, you can.
No, I can't. All I got is $40, that's all.
All right, give me the $40 and you owe me 10.
Okay, I owe you 10.
That's right.
How come I owe you 10?
But what did I ask you for?
50.
And how much did you give me?
40.
So you owe me $10.
That's right. But you owe me 40.
Now, don't change the subject.
I'm not changing the subject. You're trying to change my finances. Come on now, give me my $40.
All right, there's your $40.
Okay.
Now, give me the $10 you owe me.
I'm paying you on account.
On account?
On account, I don't know how I owe it to you.
That's the way you feel about it? It's the last time I'll ever ask you for the loan of $50.
Wait a minute, Smitty. How can I loan you $50 now? All I have is 30.
Well, give me the 30 and you owe me 20.
Okay, this is getting worse all the time. First I owe him 10, now I owe him 20.
Well, why do you run yourself into debt?
I'm not running in, you're pushing me.
I can't help it if you can't handle your finances. I do all right with my money.
Hey, you're doing all right with mine, too.
Now, wait a minute. I asked you for the loan of $50. You gave me 30. So you owe me $20. 20 and 30 is 50.
No.
Do you...
Well, you get the point. Stephen, let's take our next call now. Art, you've been holding. Thanks for holding. Are you there?
Yes. Hi,
Go
David.
ahead.
Thanks for having me on the air.
Sure.
You have a real good guest tonight. Really
Thank you.
interesting. The first time I've caught your program, I usually listen to Art Bell, and I just happened to flip you guys on tonight.
Well, thank you.
My question is, what you're telling Craig, I don't know if Craig really understands, but if you look at how much gold has stayed at its current value compared to how the dollar's dropped over the years, I think it's quite clear why the Founding Fathers established gold and silver as the currency. And like you're saying, worldwide, why it's always been accepted as a world currency compared to the manipulation of the paper dollar as we had it now.
Yes.
And one of my other questions was, maybe you could elaborate on that. Do you know anything about President Kennedy signing something into, or going to sign something into order before he was assassinated? I've heard something on that, and I don't know how true that is. And maybe you could also elaborate on how much of this is done by an elitist group, like a secret society, towards this New World Order.
Okay, those are good questions, Art. Stephen, the Kennedy alleged effort to expose the Fed is an interesting historical footnote. Also, one keep in mind that major celebrities and talk show hosts, Rush Limbaugh and so forth, even Ross Perot, none of them will really take on the Fed, will they?
Well, no, that's the problem, because people who have benefited from the system are not going to cut off the hand that has been providing a good living for them. That is the difference between having an enlightened leadership and a leadership that is motivated by its own greed. leadership that considers the needs of all of its people, and the administration of a peaceful society towards that end is something that we are in sore need of. Since we are manipulated by a ruling elite that has been in place historically for many years and has been working towards a goal that they are seeing come to pass now, and that is the total control of all resources, financial and human resources, centered in the hands of a few, a ruling class that has grown up over the years.
How about the Jack Kennedy story?
I've seen information on that says that he had signed an executive order calling into being a certain number of U.S. notes to be issued that the Fed would not collect interest on, and that had a major part to do with his assassination. And then I've seen material that says no, that didn't happen. However, it is interesting to note that it was shortly after Kennedy's assassination. In fact, I've seen in some sources it identified as on the day of his funeral, the Federal Reserve began to issue its first series of Federal Reserve notes without the promise to pay in dollars. Now, let me back up a little and give a little preface to the significance of the distribution of those altered banknotes. The modern-day counterpart to the warehouse receipt for gold that was issued by the goldsmith long ago is the Federal Reserve note. Now, remember again that the essence of psychological warfare is to confuse the meaning of words. Again, the word federal implies federal government, but the Federal Reserve is a privately owned corporation. The word reserve implies there is something to give the paper receipt value when no gold or silver backs the paper. The word note implies a contract because a note, by law, must identify who is paying, what is being paid, to whom, and when. Between 1914 and 1963, Federal Reserve notes never claimed to be money, nor did they claim to be dollars. A note for $5 read this way, quote, "The United States of America will pay to the bearer on demand $5. Can a promise to pay $5 be $5? Of course not. To the left of the president's picture and above the bank seal, it said, and this was in fine print, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank." Well, in 1963, soon after the assassination of President Kennedy, the Fed began to issue its first series of notes without the promise, while taking notes with the promise out of circulation. The question to ask here is, can paper become what it promises by removing the promise? And the answer has to be, of course it can't.
Yeah.
The contract underneath the bank seal was changed. The wording, the print got bigger, and the number of words was reduced. And it now said, as our paper money now says, "This note is legal tender for all debts, and public and private." Well, a note is an IOU. It is evidence of debt, and it's not possible to pay off a debt with a debt. The name Federal Reserve Note is a fraudulent label. Each word claims to be something that it's not. By removing the promise to redeem the note in lawful money, the federal government, in cooperation with the Federal Reserve, eliminated the monetary system of the United States as established by the Constitution and replaced it with something totally different, and that is credit. In their own publications, the Federal Reserve states that their system works only with credit, and the problem is credit is not a tangible substance like gold or silver coin. You can't touch it, you can't weigh it, you can't measure it. credit exists only in the mind. And it's necessary to control minds to induce people to accept pieces of paper with numbers on them in place of lawful money, because people don't know the difference between the two.
Yes. Okay, Stephen, we have another call. John in Goleta.
Yeah, good evening, Steve.
Good evening.
Yeah, my name is John. I live out in Goleta. Several years ago, a friend of mine showed me a check that had been returned from the Internal Revenue Service, a check that he had paid to the Internal Revenue Service,
Right.
and on the back bank. And the second part of the question would be, is the Internal Revenue Service merely the collection agency for the Federal Reserve Bank? Because several people that I know of that have tried to pay their checks to the United States Department of Treasury had their checks returned, unnegotiable as endorsed.
Okay.
You bring up excellent points. Most definitely the Internal Revenue is the collection agency for the Federal Reserve. As the Federal Reserve pumps paper money or credit into the economy, the IRS sucks it out of the economy. And the purpose of that is to manipulate the purchasing power of our artificial money supply.
Uh-huh.
See, taxes do not pay for government services.
They don't.
As people think that the tax dollars go towards paying for various government programs, but your caller, with his observation of the stamp on the check, all checks that go to the IRS are transferred to the account of the Federal Reserve as payment on the national debt. It all goes to the Federal Reserve as payment on the imaginary national debt.
Which is actually incalculable, I think, at this point in time.
Well, for one, it doesn't exist, and because there's no limit to credit.
That's right.
Because credit doesn't exist, you have an abundant supply of it.
John, any other questions?
Well, then, in essence, what you're saying, then, is that the Internal Revenue Service is merely the collection agency for the Federal Reserve Bank?
That's right.
They're not a government agency.
Well, you know, is the Department of Treasury. It doesn't say U.S. Department of Treasury, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Well, there's a problem because of something that happened back in 1933, and which kind of set things up for what's happening today. See, when using, again, here's the difference between real money, which is wealth, and credit, which is imaginary numbers issued by a central authority that reaps great benefits by having the authority to issue their credits. But when you use wealth as a medium of exchange, government has to receive wealth from its citizens to pay for goods and services. So if you are dissatisfied with the way your government is operating, the citizen can withhold payment and as a means of getting government's attention. When using credit, however, government is totally independent of taxes and doesn't have to pay for anything, because taxes are an illusion to hide the funny money system from the people, to make believe that these things that we call dollars have real value, when all they're doing, when the only thing in banks are bookkeeping entries, and the only thing that gets transferred from one account to another account, numbers get subtracted or added, there's nothing in the vault. You can't take a piece of currency, even if you had an honest banknote that promises redemption in real money, real gold and silver coin. Even if you took that to a bank, you couldn't get any real gold or silver because you got nothing in the vault. All they got is bookkeeping entries and computer symbols and blips on magnetic tape and discs, and this is what we are using as an economic system.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for the answer. We really appreciate the show.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the call. Stephen, we have another call, but let me ask you a question here before we get to that. Where is the gold?
Good question. I don't know where for sure. I'm told, I've been told it's in different places, but not in this country.
All right. Our next caller is Dex from Carpinteria. Dex, go ahead.
Yeah, back and forth on the banker's debt. I think that credit and debt is a term for a mutually agreed evaluation of an exchange. In other words, a couple of individuals agreed that this was worth that, and the money is a symbol of that. So we go into this big circuit about, what is debt and credit.
Aren't they the same thing?
Well, yeah, it's the same
That's
thing.
The problem.
So who's regulating our evaluation, see, and that violates the First Amendment. You ponder that because some big brother is telling us what our exchange is worth and then is thus regulating our ability to exchange.
Guys, we keep forgetting the Constitution. I'm speaking rhetorically here, but as you well know, Article 1, Section 10 says it right there. No state shall make anything except gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. It's right there.
Right, and you have 1.8e, or the fifth part, which says that the Congress shall regulate the value of the currency. And I think in your Hegelian, step-up, as I call it, what we did around 1913 is we got bad representatives who weren't doing their job. And so we said, well, we're going to improve this and have autonomous bankers run it for us independently. And analogous to that now, we have the motor voters and the dumbed-down population who aren't doing their job, and now we're going to accept Big Brother to bring us back into order.
Stephen?
That's a real problem. And it all goes back to not understanding what's honest money and what is this magic credit system we're using today. That is, it is nothing but a slave system. Government doesn't pay. Federal government doesn't pay for anything. Deficit spending. The whole concept of deficit spending is absurd. How do you spend a debt?
Yeah.
You can't.
Stephen.
And it's a deficit for government is an asset because they're buying things, and the banking system is buying things with the credit that they create literally out of thin air.
Stephen, I wanted to ask you a question and get off. What do you think is really going on with the so-called bailout of Mexico? Isn't this kind of rhetorically an interfinancial deal, and we're scapegoating the Mexicans?
Well, I think that in the past months, what we are witnessing today, along with various trade agreements that are in effect, is that the world has been divided up by all these the major financial interests, and that. But again, the core problem, the real problem, goes back to what we're using as money. We're not using something that has been proven effective throughout history. We're not using something that is mandated by the Constitution. We are not using anything that is even sanctioned by not only Western scriptures but others. Throughout history, it has been gold and silver. It has been a real substance that you're using as money. And not paper that is redeemable for nothing. That's the problem. If you're going to use paper currency, it's only honest when you get a one unit of paper money, $1. You get $1 worth of gold or $1 worth of silver coin. A dollar unit of paper money that is not redeemable is a dollar unit of credit, is a dollar unit of inflation, is a dollar unit of nothing. And we're getting manipulated and taken down the river by manipulation of language and manipulation of numbers that passes an economic system. The men who walk the halls of high finance throughout the world must howl with laughter at what they've been able to perpetrate on us.
All right, we thank Dex for the call, and I'm sure there are some chuckles. It makes perfect sense to me. I have heard reports here and there that part of the Mexico deal is that the Rockefeller family, this is just hearsay, of course, is interested in acquiring Pemex and has been so interested for many years, and that's at the bottom of some of it.
Well, it's, again, private wealth, massive wealth, families, not only in this country, but primarily European, although the whole world is locked into this.
That's right.
This effort to solidify both political and economic control. We already have a world government. We have had it for a while. Economic control has been centralized. We are not masters of our own fate so long as we allow a dishonest money system to continue. And the bottom line is that it's dishonest. And this is where their greatest weakness is, the ruling elite who who have stretched their tentacles into all areas, all institutions in society, that the creation of credit, those people who create and issue credit to get everything for nothing. They use, manipulate figures, numbers of nothing to acquire real things, real wealth, real property.
Okay, Stephen, that's just about it for time. I want to duck in the address again for your two outstanding audio cassettes, Mind Control in America and Wake Up America. Both can be acquired by writing to MCIA Media, P.O. Box 15734, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. 27113 is the zip. That's Box 15734. And the zip code is 27113, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Thank you, Stephen.
The two different prices on the tapes.
Yeah.
Mind Control in America is $11.95. Wake Up America is $12.95 plus $2 shipping and handling. When ordered together as a set, one of each tape, the cost is $22, including postage.
That's wonderful. And I've got both of them, and they're outstanding tapes. Thank you for a wonderful 2 hours, Stephen, and we'll talk again.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure, Jeff.
Okay, good night now. And thank you for being with us here again at the end of the line Sunday evening. We'll be back again next week, same time, same station. Until then, Jeff Rense wishing you a very good evening and good luck.